Hello everybody, wanted to take a little break from my comic book video and want to share with you another cool hobby of mine, which is growing carnivorous plants. And I've been growing carnivorous plants since I was a kid. Started out with Venus flytraps and worked my way through sundews and sarracenias and nepenthes. And like everybody else, I've killed my share of carnivorous plants over the years and can't even keep account of how many I've actually killed. But over those years, I've learned my mistakes, and now I think I got a pretty good handle. And I'm growing my Venus flytraps and my Sarracenia and my sundew outdoor here in Southern California. And they've been doing pretty well for the last 5 to 6 years. And I produced a bog-like environment for them outside, and they seem to handle the Southern California heat and sun pretty well. One carnivorous plant that I've never had an opportunity to grow, which I've always wanted to, was the Cephalotus. And for those of you who don't know, that's the Australian pitcher plant. And in the carnivorous world, that is considered the premium plant to have. And the difficulty of getting a Cephalotus back several years ago was that they were the most expensive carnivorous plants to purchase. When I was looking for them online, I could not find a Cephalotus for less than $30. They average $40 to $50 a piece. And for the Hummer variety, which is considered the larger Australian pitcher plant variety, you were paying well over $60 for that plant, and not including the shipping. The shipping was well over $15, $20 depending on the seller and whether you were buying it as a bare root or potted. For someone who wants to start growing Cephalotus, you could pay up to $50, $60, $70 just to start. And at the time I was a little intimidated by the growing habits of the Cephalotus. It is considered the fickle carnivorous plants, very difficult to grow, and I didn't want to spend that much amount of money and end up with a dead plant. But back in 2015, I happened to be on eBay and found a seller who was selling little baby Cephalotus for 12 bucks and only charged $8 for shipping. For 20 bucks I could get my own Cephalotus, so I jumped on the chance and purchased it. When I bought it, it was slightly smaller size than what you see here, and I'll tell you the journey that I went through with this little guy. But just to let you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video was because, as I mentioned earlier, purchasing a Cephalotus was very expensive. And I went on YouTube to look at some of the other people who have experience in growing Cephalotus and find out what kind of setup they had. And if you're like me, if you go on YouTube and you look up Cephalotus growers, I mean, the majority of the growers were basically owners of greenhouses, or they spent literally hundreds and thousands of dollars setting up their bedroom or their basement with fancy shelves and expensive lightings to grow their carnivorous plants and their Cephalotus. And quite honestly, I looked at those videos and said, holy follicularis, I can't compare myself to some of these guys, and wasn't about to spend that much money on buying a greenhouse or turning my bedroom into a greenhouse with the fancy lights and fancy shelves and the reflectors. And I said, well, is there any way I can grow a Cephalotus without having to spend an arm and a leg? So I made this video not so much as a teaching video, but a learning video for people to follow my little journey in growing my Cephalotus. And I want to keep it cheap as possible. Now, looking at my setup here, it's not considered really cheap per se. I had an old fish aquarium that, of course, I wasn't using, so I used that as a terrarium. And back several years ago, I was growing carnivorous plants indoors, and I purchased from Amazon this grow light setup, which cost about 50-60 bucks at the time. And to keep the humidity high, I'm just using cheap, basically kitchen saran wrap to cover the top. When I first purchased this little guy, it was only one plant, but as you can tell, there's actually two plants. And what happened was, when I first purchased this guy, I was a little intimidated and wanted to make sure all my conditions were right. And all the books that I read said that the cephalotus require high humidity. And so I basically covered my aquarium with the saran wrap completely. And I grew this guy in a sealed container. And the glass here was basically all steamed up and fogged. And for several months I was watering the plant on top. And for those of you who follow all the growing guides, one of the recommendations was not to water the cephalotus on top because you get the crowns and leaves wet and you increase the chance of mold and fungus growth as well as rotting on top. And with the container being sealed with my cellophane and the high heat humidity, over several months of owning this, my cephalotus pretty much died. Now I don't know whether it's partly due to my neglect, because I took some time off on vacation with the family, would be gone for a week, and maybe during those times it dried up, or it just basically rotted because of the high humidity. Anyway, when I came back from vacation, pretty much my cephalotus was all black. The only thing left was one green trap. And honestly, I thought it was a goner. But because it still had one green trap left, I took extra care to take care of it and basically revive it. I removed the cellophane, or at least I kept the cellophane partially covered, left some opening so that there'd be some sort of ventilation. I avoid the glass steaming up. And as you can see, I have the original pot here in another container, so I'm actually watering this plant from the bottom up, and I fill the container halfway up with water, and then as it goes down and dries up, I fill it again. And I do this maybe twice a week. And as you can tell, the one trap that was left has survived and produced other traps. One of the surprising outcomes of nearly killing my plant was that out of the corpse came out another shoot. So this cephalotus originally was only one. As you can tell, there's actually two now, because again, to my surprise, out of the corpse came another shooting or plant, and now I actually have two Cephalotus, and they both are doing very well. And I'm hoping that I can continue my growing luck and I won't die. Now the medium that I have this in is a unknown medium. I grow carnivorous plants, and I have a mixture of peat moss and sand. My guess is this is maybe 1 part peat moss, 1 part sand. And I did boil the growing medium for about 5 minutes to kill off any fungus and mold to try to avoid any of that pest growing in my plant. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of sphagnum moss growing, and initially I was pulling out the sphagnum moss because, quite frankly, they were growing a lot faster and a lot larger than my Cephalotus. And I had put a layer of sand on top just to prevent the growth, but as you can tell, the sphagnum moss has grown out of the sand, which actually is a good sign. For those who may not be aware, the sphagnum moss in the carnivorous world is considered to be the canary. If your water is of quality water, distilled, reverse osmosis, purified water, then that's a good sign. And if your lighting and the humidity is good, then you should get sphagnum moss growing, which is a sign that your growing condition is optimal. So even though I try to avoid the sphagnum moss growing because they grow so fast compared to my Cephalotus, it is a good sign. So I want to share with you who are watching some of the ways you can grow a Cephalotus without spending an arm and a leg. My setup, even though it's not the cheapest way, it's at least for me, seems to be working fine and growing the Cephalotus, especially bringing it back from near death. For those of you who are interested, recently I went online to eBay, and there is a seller out there who's growing, or at least, selling baby Cephalotus for $12.50 on eBay, and charges about $8. So again, for $20 you can get yourself a little baby Cephalotus. As far as the lighting, again, when I purchased this setup, I paid $50-$60 back about 4 or 5 years ago. But today now, with the new advance in technologies and LED lights, you can go on Amazon and buy a LED grow light, a desk clamp light for less than $15. So the lighting setup and the plant all together will cost you less than $50. And I have this lighting on a timer for 14 hours. And again, you can purchase a very inexpensive timer for less than $10. The only other costs that you would have to consider would be the water. And I purchased my water from a vending machine. Glacier is the name of the vending machine out here in Southern California. But you can go to your supermarket and purchase distilled water by the gallon. And of course, depending on how big or how many plants you have, 1 gallon of distilled water should last you quite a long time. So for those of you out there who have wanted to grow a Cephalotus, just wanted to share with you how you can keep it fairly cheap and not spend literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a setup. And again, I'm still learning how to grow a Cephalotus. My concern is that with the winter coming, some places have advised that Cephalotus require a dormancy, and some do not require being dormant. So come winter this month, I'll see what happens to my plant once I decrease the lighting from its current 14 hours to 12-hour lighting. And hopefully it will survive this summer. A lot of people have shared with me, and I've read in books, that the Cephalotus required a cold night. And here in Southern California, again, the living condition that I have for this plant is pretty much between 70 and 82 degrees constantly throughout the night and throughout the day. So we'll see in a few months whether my plant can survive without the fluctuation of temperature between night and day that I seem to be reading. But again, so far they're doing very well. The trap seems to be getting bigger, and both plants are doing very well. So for those of you who are newcomers to carnivorous plants, want to follow me and learn from my mistakes, I'm hoping I don't kill my Cephalotus, but if I do, I will share with you on my video what I did wrong. And if I'm successful, hopefully that will help for those of you out there to optimize your growing conditions. So follow me on my little journey here. And in another month or two, I will do an update and show how far I've gotten with keeping this little guy alive. Thank you for watching.